Here is my Ferrari 296. And this is the hybrid battery out of it. And we think the reason why this car don't start is something to do with this in the hybrid battery.
It didn't explode into headlines overnight, but behind the scenes, something far more unsettling began to unfold. On one side is Mat Armstrong, a builder known for resurrecting wrecked supercars in front of millions. On the other hand, there is Ferrari, a brand that is famous for controlling every detail of its machines. Caught between them is a silent, unfinished Ferrari 296 GTB, a car capable of 819 horsepower, yet unable to even start. Parts have reportedly stopped coming. Access to critical systems remains locked. As this high-stakes standoff over control and ownership unfolds, Ferrari versus Mat Armstrong has just gotten ugly. Let's start from the very beginning. The car that refused to start. In his garage, Mat Armstrong stands over what should be one of the most advanced road cars ever built, the Ferrari 296 GTB, a machine launched in 2021, powered by a 3-liter twin-turbo V6 paired with an electric motor, delivering a combined 819 horsepower. On paper, it can rocket from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 2.9 seconds. In reality, this one doesn't move at all, because it won't start. Armstrong purchased the car, already damaged, badly enough that it had previously been assessed by a Ferrari dealership. Reports tied to the car's earlier inspection suggested severe and expensive issues. And from the very first moment he powered it on, a warning flashed across the dashboard. Hybrid system failure. This was not a minor fault. Not something you fix with a wrench and patience. This is the kind of error that points directly back to the manufacturer. But you see, Mat Armstrong had other plans. Modern Ferraris are not just mechanical machines. They are rolling networks of encrypted systems, software locks, and tightly controlled electronic architectures. The 296 GTB in particular represents a new era for the brand. It is the brand's first road-going V6 hybrid, integrating high-voltage components and complex control units. According to Ferrari's own technical disclosures, the car's hybrid system includes a 7.45 kilowatt-hour battery, advanced power electronics, and integrated vehicle control software that manages everything from torque delivery to energy recovery. When that system fails, access is not universal. It's restricted. And Armstrong knew this. Still, he pushed forward. Over weeks that turned into months, he rebuilt the car piece by piece. The bodywork was restored, structural components were repaired, mechanical systems were reassembled. But this wasn't just a rebuild. At some point, the project evolved. Armstrong began fitting genuine parts from the Ferrari 296 Challenge, a track-only variant designed for Ferrari's single-make racing series. These were not standard road components. They belonged to a controlled ecosystem, one that Ferrari tightly manages. From the outside, the car began to look complete, aggressive, finished even. But beneath the surface, the engine still didn't fire. The electronics remained locked. The same warning persisted: hybrid system failure. And here's the critical detail. According to Mat Armstrong's own statements, the only way to resolve this issue was through Ferrari's systems, dealer-level diagnostics, proprietary tools, and potentially factory authorization. Independent access wasn't enough. Even with millions of subscribers and resources, he couldn't bypass that wall. Then, something else happened. Parts stopped arriving. Armstrong stated that Ferrari had ceased supplying certain components needed to continue the build. He was told that the car had to first go through official Ferrari inspection channels, typically involving an approved body shop and verification process. This wasn't unusual in isolation. Ferrari has long maintained strict control over how its vehicles are repaired, especially after major damage. But in this case, the timing mattered. The car had already been heavily modified. It now carried race-derived components. It had been rebuilt outside Ferrari's approved procedures, which meant passing that inspection could be extremely difficult. And so, the project stalled. This is where the tension built. Because the Ferrari 296 GTB isn't just any car. With a starting price of around $322,000 at launch, it represents the cutting edge of performance engineering. But it also represents something else: a shift in ownership. When a car requires manufacturer permission to function at its core level, the definition of ownership starts to blur. Armstrong's case made that visible. He didn't buy a running car and break it. He bought a broken one and tried to fix it. That distinction mattered. Yet even after months of documented work, the final step remained out of reach. So the car waited. And that's what made this story different. Because nothing here was hidden. Every step had been filmed. Every setback shared. Viewers had watched the transformation in real time. But now, the final barrier wasn't mechanical failure, but access. Access to software. Access to systems. Access to Ferrari itself. The ignition button was pressed. The dashboard lit up. The warning remained. And the car that should scream down a track at 8,500 revolutions per minute stayed silent. Ambitious rebuild meets manufacturer control. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no single moment where the project crosses a line. Instead, somewhere between stripped panels and reassembled carbon fiber, the rebuild changes direction. Quietly, irreversibly, it stops being a repair. Inside his workshop, Mat Armstrong isn't just fixing a damaged supercar anymore. He's reshaping it. The Ferrari 296 GTB was just what it was designed to be. One of the most advanced road cars Ferrari had ever produced. Introduced in 2021, engineered in Maranello, it was fast, precise, and new. After delivery, the car was purchased by a private owner, widely reported to be based in the UK. The car was then exported to Cyprus. The owner had barely spent time with the car before the crash. This places the incident very early in the car's life, likely within weeks or months of ownership. The crash took place in Cyprus, with strong indications pointing toward Limassol, where footage and local reports circulated widely on social media at the time. Acceleration, loss of traction, overcorrection, impact. The 296 GTB produces over 800 horsepower through its rear wheels. That level of power, delivered instantly, especially by a hybrid system with electric torque, can overwhelm grip if not carefully managed. In this case, multiple accounts tied to the crash suggest the car lost rear traction during acceleration. Once that happens, physics takes over. The rear of the car steps out. The driver attempts to correct. But instead of stabilizing, the correction becomes too aggressive. The car snaps in the opposite direction. This is a classic instability sequence often described in performance driving as a tank slapper or rapid oscillation of control. Within seconds, control is gone. And then comes the impact. The condition of the car afterward tells the story with brutal clarity. The damage was concentrated and severe, strong enough to tear apart suspension components, deform structural sections, and compromise the chassis. This wasn't a glancing blow or a low-speed collision. It was a high-energy crash, consistent with loss of control under acceleration. There are also indications, though not officially confirmed by Ferrari, that traction or stability control systems may not have been active at the time. What we can say with certainty is that there was a sudden loss of rear grip. The car was left in a state severe enough that, when it reached an official Ferrari dealership in Cyprus, the assessment concluded that repair would be extremely expensive and highly complex. The damage wasn't limited to visible panels. It extended into the structure and, critically, into the systems that define the 296 GTB. The 296 GTB's hybrid system includes a high-voltage battery and integrated electronic architecture designed to shut down in the event of a collision. Safety mechanisms such as high-voltage isolation and system cutoffs are triggered automatically. Once activated, they can disable large portions of the car's internal network. So after the crash, the car didn't just sit damaged. It effectively shut itself down. That's why the now famous error message, "Hybrid System Failure," appears. It's not just reporting a fault. It's the system acknowledging that something fundamental has been interrupted, something that requires controlled manufacturer-level intervention to restore. And that's the hidden consequence of the accident. The visible damages, crushed panels, broken suspension, and torn structure are only part of the story. The shutdown of electronic systems and the isolation of the hybrid architecture truly define what happened next. Because once those systems go offline in a modern Ferrari, restarting them isn't simple. It's not like older cars, where mechanical repair could bring everything back. Here, the car's ability to function depends on layers of software, authorization, and system integrity checks. And all of that was disrupted in a single moment. What makes this incident particularly striking is how quickly it unfolded. A car engineered to reach 330 kilometers per hour, built with cutting-edge stability systems and performance controls, lost control not on a racetrack, but on a public road. A brief loss of traction, a misjudged input, and the margin for error disappeared instantly. There were no widely reported serious injuries, which is significant given the level of damage. But the car itself absorbed the full consequence. From a nearly new, six-figure supercar to a structurally compromised, electronically disabled machine. In seconds. By the time Mat Armstrong found it, the car had already been inspected by an official dealership. The outcome was decisive. The damage was too extensive. The repair too complex. Especially given the car's hybrid architecture. Structurally compromised. Electrically shut down. Financially unjustifiable to restore within Ferrari's approved framework. In industry terms, it was effectively written off. But you see, not all salvage cars disappear. Some move into a secondary pipeline. Less visible, less documented. High-end wrecks like this rarely go through public auctions with full transparency. Instead, they are often handled through insurance disposals, specialist brokers, or private salvage networks. Somewhere in that network, this Ferrari surfaced. Armstrong bought the wrecked Ferrari 296 GTB, fully aware of what it was. Not a lightly damaged car, not a quick flip. A non-running, heavily compromised machine that even Ferrari had stepped away from. And then came the decision. Because buying a car like this isn't just about money, it's about risk assessment. The numbers alone don't tell the full story. Yes, the value had dropped dramatically from its original price. That's typical for salvage. But this wasn't just any Ferrari. This was a 2021-era hybrid supercar. It was packed with systems that are not easily accessed or reset. Armstrong knew that. He also knew something else. No one else was likely to take it on. That's the moment where most buyers walk away. Too complex, too uncertain, too dependent on systems they don't control. But for someone whose entire model revolves around rebuilding the unrebuildable, that risk becomes the point. So, the deal happened. Armstrong flew to Cyprus, where the Ferrari still sat after the crash and dealer inspection. And when he saw it in person, the reality set in. The damage went deeper than panels. Structural elements were compromised. Components were missing or destroyed. The hybrid system was inactive. This wasn't something you clear with a scan tool. It pointed to a system-level shutdown, likely triggered during the crash. Still, the plan didn't change. If anything, it only escalated. Armstrong didn't just inspect the car. He started working on it there, in Cyprus. He brought parts with him, reportedly thousands of dollars worth, and began the first phase of getting the car back together. Not fully restored, not functional, but enough to move forward. Enough to prove that the project could begin. Once the initial work was done, the car was transported out of Cyprus. That transition marks the true beginning of the rebuild phase. But what began as restoration slowly turned into something else entirely. Because Mat Armstrong didn't stop at factory spec, he started sourcing genuine components from the Ferrari 296 Challenge. The track-only variant built exclusively for Ferrari's single-make racing series. This was not a cosmetic upgrade. The Challenge car was fundamentally different. Lighter, more aggressive, stripped of road comforts, engineered for circuit performance. Its parts existed within a closed ecosystem, typically tied to race teams, approved customers, and controlled distribution channels. And yet, piece by piece, those components began appearing in Armstrong's build. The transformation was visible. The car took on a more extreme stance. Aerodynamics shifted. It was no longer purely a road car, not officially a race car either. It became something Ferrari itself never sold, a hybrid between worlds. That's where the tension began. Ferrari's systems, both technical and logistical, are built around precision and control. Every road car is tied to a specific chassis number. Every part is matched, logged, and distributed accordingly. When Armstrong began installing race-derived components onto a road-registered Ferrari 296 GTB, that alignment started to break. According to Armstrong's own statements, this was when the flow of parts changed. At first, orders were fulfilled. Some components arrived. The build continued. But then, things slowed down. Certain parts were no longer supplied. Requests stalled. Communication became limited. And eventually, a condition was made clear. The car had to go through official Ferrari inspection channels. Ferrari-approved inspections verify that a vehicle meets factory standards. But here's the problem. This car no longer fits those specifications. The rebuild had been carried out outside Ferrari's approved repair procedures. It incorporated non-standard configurations and race components. Even if every bolt was perfectly installed, the car existed outside the framework that Ferrari recognized. Public drama and online scrutiny. By early 2026, the project had reached its most critical phase, nearly complete physically, but still electronically locked. And that's when the audience shifted, from passive viewers to active participants. Across platforms like YouTube comments and Reddit threads, particularly in communities tracking Armstrong's builds, the reaction split almost immediately. One side points to the company's long-standing reputation for strict control over parts, servicing, and brand image. The situation looks like a modern ownership problem. You can buy a car, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, rebuild it from near total damage, but still be unable to fully operate it without the manufacturer's cooperation. The numbers reinforce the tension. The 296 GTB launched at around $300,000 to $22,000. And yet, here it is, immobilized, waiting on access controlled entirely outside the owner's hands. But the other side of the audience tells a different story. They focus on Armstrong's decisions. The moment he began installing Ferrari 296 Challenge parts, components designed for a track-only race car, not a road-legal vehicle, they argue, the outcome became predictable. Ferrari's systems are built around exact configurations, specific VINs, specific part compatibility, and specific procedures. Once those boundaries are crossed, the system doesn't adapt. It resists. And that's where a single phrase begins to surface again and again. FAFO. Short for, you messed around and now you're finding out, it becomes a kind of shorthand for the situation. What's striking is how evenly divided the reaction remains. Scroll through discussions and you'll see both arguments running in parallel, often in the same thread. One comment points to right to repair laws, highlighting how only a limited number of regions, particularly certain U.S. states, have begun pushing legislation that forces manufacturers to provide access to diagnostic tools and repair data. Another comment counters that Ferrari isn't a mass-market brand. It's a company built on exclusivity, precision, and control. And those standards don't bend easily. Neither side fully convinces the other. And that's what turns this into something bigger than a YouTube series. Because the facts themselves are not in dispute. The car doesn't start. The hybrid system requires Ferrari-level access. Armstrong has stated that parts supply has been restricted pending official inspection. Ferrari has not issued a public statement. Everything else lives in the space between those facts. That space is where the drama grows. Ownership, brand, and the future. It ends, or perhaps it begins, with a question that refuses to go away. What does it actually mean to own a car? Ferrari, as a company, has never positioned itself as just a manufacturer. It's a brand built on precision, exclusivity, and control. From limited production numbers, often fewer than 10,000 cars annually worldwide, to tightly managed customization programs, Ferrari has historically maintained a strong grip on how its vehicles are built, modified, and presented. That control isn't accidental. It's part of the identity. And in the case of the 296 GTB, that identity extends into technology. The car's hybrid system, its 7.45 kilowatt-hour battery, electric motor, and integrated control units, is not designed for open access. It requires proprietary tools, dealer-level diagnostics, and in many cases, direct interaction with Ferrari's own systems. This isn't unique to Ferrari, but in this case, it becomes highly visible. Because when something goes wrong, or when a rebuild deviates from factory pathways, that control tightens. Armstrong's project puts that reality in the spotlight. He hasn't just repaired the car, he's reshaped it. By integrating Ferrari 296 Challenge components and rebuilding outside-approved procedures, he's created something that sits outside Ferrari's standard framework. And that matters, because Ferrari's systems are designed to support cars that stay within that framework. So when Armstrong reaches the final stage, when the car is physically complete but electronically locked, the limitation becomes clear. Ownership has boundaries. You can possess the machine. You can rebuild it. You can even improve it, visually and mechanically. But certain functions, critical ones, remain tied to the manufacturer. Access to those functions isn't automatic. It's conditional. And in this case, that condition is approval. Armstrong has claimed that parts supply has been restricted, that official inspection is required, and that the car cannot be completed without manufacturer involvement, and the visible fact that the car still does not start. From there, everything else unfolds, because the implications go beyond one build. Across the automotive industry, the concept of right to repair has been gaining traction. In the United States, only a limited number of states have enacted laws requiring manufacturers to provide independent access to repair data and diagnostic tools. In Europe, similar discussions have taken place around consumer rights and product accessibility. As cars become more software-driven, control is shifting away from owners. What looks like a finished machine can still be incomplete. It is not held back not by hardware, but by access. And as this story shows, ownership today isn't just about having the car. It's about who controls whether it works. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.